Hello, everyone. This is News Now from the Belmont Journal, and we have Lisa Gibalerio with us today. Lisa is a prevention specialist with Wayside Youth and Family Support Network and coordinator of the Belmont Wellness Coalition. And I'm your host, Mike Crowley. So it's good to see you again, Lisa.
You too, Mike. Thank you for having me.
So today we're talking about teens and substance use, something many parents are thinking about as we're approaching graduation and potential summer gatherings. So Lisa, let me ask you, what are some things that parents should be thinking about when it comes to kids, especially teens and substance use?
Yeah, so there are some best practices that I can share and will share with our audience today, Mike. And first and foremost, I would say that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that parents who are talking with their kids about this topic, those kids tend to delay, those kids tend to actually fare better in this regard. So talking with your kids, and not one conversation, but ongoing conversation. So that would be the first point, is to sit down with them, hopefully starting, as young as, the beginning of middle school, and talk about substances, and not just to come down and say, absolutely no, and leave it at that, but to share your thinking, share your reasoning with your children. Talk about how alcohol and other drugs impact their young developing brains. Talk about the fact that it impairs their good judgment, that, the rates of things, all different kinds of accidents go up when people have been taking in substances and are impaired. The risk of a sexual assault scenario goes up with alcohol and other drugs. So make your expectations clear to your kids. Let them know where you stand. And again, share why why you're saying that you do not want them to engage in substance use.
Let me ask you, Lisa, what parents should be thinking about in terms of supervision when it comes to their kids and potential substance use. Should parents be staying home to chaperone teen gatherings?
So, yeah, this comes as bad news to parents who, of course, spent years with little ones, feeling like they were tied to the house. But I guess if you want to ensure safety for the teenagers who are gathering at your house, somebody has to be supervising. So I would say for a while, until you can really gain trust and know what their habits and behaviors are, supervision is a really good idea. And I'll add one more compelling reason, which is something called the social host liability law, which actually codifies that if something should go wrong at your house, whether you knew about the gathering or not, whether you sanctioned the serving of alcohol or not, you are legally responsible should something go wrong. So that's another reason that people need to be supervising. So yeah, I think it is a great idea for at least one parent to be on the premises. Can you pop out to dinner? Absolutely. But I wouldn't leave teenagers having gatherings for long periods of time.
All right, Lisa. So parents really do need, in some sense, to be supervising their kids and also talking with them. What else would you recommend?
Another great parenting tool is getting to know the parents of your kids' friends. This is a place where you can get more information, where you can have reality checks, where you can kind of strengthen your own parenting bonds by being in communication with other parents. So you're going to want to get their cell phone numbers, first of all. So if you hear everybody is gathering at Mary's house, you can shoot a quick text to Mary's mom and say, hey, I heard there's something happening at your house on Friday night. I just want to check in. Are you aware of this? Will you be home? And will you be supervising? So that kind of gives parents kind of a sanity check, gives them more data. But you also want to get a sense of their orientation on teenagers and substances. So for example, if you hear that, at John's house, parents are more laid back and they think a little beer in the basement isn't so bad. Well, whatever you do with that data is up to you, but at least you have it, right? You know that that's a house that's more relaxed, and you may make decisions based on that, or you may not, but at least you have the data. So that is definitely a tip, which is get to know, be able to text these parents just to get more data, just to be, to get more communication out front.
Let me ask you your take on sleepovers.
That is a loaded question. So I think in some ways sleepovers can be a red herring. So I approach them the way you would approach a hot stove, with caution. You're gonna, again, this is why conversing with your kids is so important, because in having ongoing conversations, you will have a sense of, you will have built up some trust or not, and you'll have a sense of what's happening at other people's houses or not. So I would say listen to your gut, listen to your own instinct, have honest conversations with your child, and check in with the parents of whom that sleepover house is planned for.
Let me ask you if parents should be locking up the liquor cabinet.
I would say it's not a bad practice during these years. Perhaps you have absolutely no reason to suspect that your child is dabbling, and you feel fine not doing that, and that's great. These are individual family choices, Mike, so different families are going to choose different approaches, and that's okay. But I don't think it's a bad practice. In fact, I know of parents who have no alcohol in the house at all for these years. They may order a glass of wine out at dinner. They may bring in a bottle of Prosecco for, a holiday, but their practice while they have, 14 to 18-year-olds in the house is just to keep the house free of alcohol.
Let me ask you about consequences. If our teens disappoint us involving, about substance use, are they really too old to be facing consequences, or is this something that we all should be keeping in mind?
So again, different families will approach consequences differently. I think there's nothing wrong, so long as they know up front that if you violate our expectation around alcohol and other drugs, or around curfew, or around anything, quite honestly, there will be this consequence, whether it's, losing the cell phone, or grounding, or losing car privileges, or whatever it is. Make sure it is laid out clear. And as we say with our toddlers, if we've laid it out and they do violate our expectation, you got to follow through with the consequence. If you don't follow through, you will lose all credibility. So I think it's perfectly fine to have consequences. It's your house, your rules. And if they violate your rules, a consequence is kind of a natural outcome.
Let me ask you about some of the thoughts that parents often have, along the lines of, it's safer, if it's better that it happens in my house than somewhere else when it comes to substance use, or perhaps it's better to experiment a little at home before heading off to college. What do you think about those kinds of thoughts?
So as a public health practitioner, I would have to say that there's not a whole lot of data to support that it's safer or that it's okay to start experimenting earlier. What we want with our kids, the goal is to delay use for as long as possible. So if it gets put off until college, you will have at least given their developing brains that many more years to develop without having these substances in the brain. So I would say it's not really safer, because you're greenlighting a behavior that could potentially be addictive. You're greenlighting a behavior that has all sorts of potential consequences, including the ones we've already talked about, impairing their judgment. So I guess I find that problematic. I think it's better to delay, but then you'll have parents that say, I don't want them experimenting for the first time away from me or at college. And that is why we tell parents that's a great concern. And that's why you keep talking with your kids, and you talk about the fact that, okay, you've done well getting through high school without experimenting. That's great. I know that took some courage, and it took really making some good choices. And we know you're going to experiment a little at college, but we want you to do that experimentation also applying good judgment, applying moderation. So we don't just send them off to college as if, enjoy the big party. We send them off to college with a, continued conversation around moderation and just, again, approaching the use of substances quite cautiously.
Very helpful advice, Lisa. Any final thoughts?
I guess I would just say, Mike, that, as parents, our children are watching us. So it is important, whatever we do with our liquor cabinets, and that is a private decision for families, but I would say to model good, habits around drinking. So just be aware that our kids are looking to us. If they make a mistake, and it's, they're kids, their frontal lobe is not going to be developed until mid to late 20s. Offer them support, whether there's a consequence or not. Offer them love. Let them know that, mistakes are part of growing. And I guess one final point that is a good parenting tool is that, especially this summer, graduation parties and everyone's vaccinated parties, give your kid a safe out. Let them know that if things get a little scary at a party, and they're feeling uncomfortable, or they're feeling pressured to try something that they really don't want to try, that they can text you, and that, there won't be a punishment for that, you are a safe way to get them out of a situation that may have become a little too much for them. So offer your child, as they go off, use good judgment, make good decisions. And I'm here if you need to get out of this situation. I'll come pick you up, and, I'm there for you for that.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. We've been talking about kids and substance use. This is the Belmont Journal News Now. I'm Mike Crowley, and we will see you next time.
Yes. Thanks, Mike.